but to make it sound even worse than that is, in my view, criminal. Because people who have got things wrong with them, we don't know what would have happened to them normally, but just on COVID alone, the figures don't add up.
Stephen, by the way, the government, they actually don't try and hide anything from you. No, they actually put it. We are so. Well, I wasn't. People are so terrified that they're literally sitting at home thinking death, destruction, and doom. Now, they actually took all flu deaths away. All flu deaths suddenly became COVID deaths, and the World Health Organization reported how many flu deaths? Naught. So suddenly flu has now morphed into COVID, and then they start telling us that anyone that died, they actually write it on the screen, anyone that died for any reason within 28 days of a positive test. So if you got run over by a 51 bus in Orpington, okay, you died of COVID. If you'd had a positive test within 28 days. So, and then in late July, they summarily took 5,000 off of the death figures because they said, oh, we're really sorry, but we did a bit too much higgledy-piggledy, and we're going to take 5,000 off because we over-egged it a little bit. And I've never forgotten the average amount of deaths, Steve, that the UK has from flu per year is normally between 14 and 20,000 deaths of flu.
Yeah.
And guess what? The average age of death for COVID in the UK is about 82 and a half, which I think is probably older than the average age expectancy.
Well, I think the age expectancy is 81.
81.
So, yeah,
it's so
different.
And then they go to tell you that over 90%, if this is really rubbing you up the wrong way, I'm sorry, but these are government stats. So I know there will be people at home now throwing eggs at the TV, throwing cups of tea at the TV. Oh, you're scaring us. No, I'm trying to address the fear that we've all had. 90% of those 82-year-olds had between 1 and 3 serious comorbidities.
Yeah.
Serious lung condition, whatever. There's loads of things. Cardiac situations. That at that age, flu itself is a normal threat.
Yes.
Steve, have we been fed a bit of a line?
I think we have, and let me just give you a couple of facts that go back to the very beginning of this. First of all, Boris, on the day that he announced the first lockdown, the government's own website had already downgraded the pandemic. So, we've downgraded the pandemic, and yet he's now putting us into lockdown. So there's the first thing that says, hang on, what's going on here? And apparently it says that it was based on the consideration that the high consequence infectious disease criteria was no longer being met. Well, okay, so in that case, why did we carry on with it? The second fact is that the Coronavirus Act that was laid before Parliament was laid before Parliament, I believe, on the 19th of March last year, okay, and it passed through without a vote on the 23rd of March, and it got through the Lords again on the 25th of March. So from the 19th through to the 25th, it had got royal assent. Never before has something gone through that quick, and especially without a vote. So they must have had that ready to go very quickly. But the other thing is that, Matt Hancock told the House of Commons on March the 16th that people would have to avoid contact with each other. And then on March the 23rd, Boris announced to the country that we're going on to lockdown. But also on the 19th, when he said about the contact, we'd already downgraded it. So there's something just not right here. And that's at the very beginning. And then we look at SAGE. Now, SAGE is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. We've heard of them before. But the interesting thing on this particularly is that what has happened is they have started a psychological war on the people of this country, and there is a psychological wing, and funny enough, it's called Spy B. And it's full of people that are into the psychology and the policing of things such as riots and all of those things. So what was the point of that? If they're expecting us to, or they want us to behave in a certain way, then they've got the people in show us the way to do it. And there was I don't know whether it was a leaked document, but it was certainly put out on the internet from Sage. I did have a copy here somewhere. Of all the things that they would do, and one of the things was that if they didn't comply with a certain thing, that they would then get the media in to make things worse so that they would comply. So a lot of this stuff has been well thought out beforehand. It's not like, right, we've got a pandemic, let's sort the pandemic out, let's sort the hospitals out, let's get that done. This is more psychological. And they've worked it through the whole of the media and in the hype that they've done. So I think the answer is yes, we are being duped. But, they've used something that is real and they're taking it so much further than it needs to go.
Absolutely, Steve. Steve, I remember back in the very early days when you'd have the threesome standing there, at number 10 Downing Street with their morose voices and their desperately concerned faces. And it was very clear. It was absolutely clear. We're in an age, Steve, when you can send men to the moon, and we can do all sorts of things scientifically. And Professor Van Tam got up and said very clearly, the science is very, very clear. For anyone that's healthy, the use of masks are not needed whatsoever. It neither stops you getting it, neither stops passing you on. For healthy people, there's no need for masks whatsoever. The Attorney General back in America back last year was telling people don't go and buy masks. Even Dr. Fauci, until I think it was the 4th, till April the 3rd. April the 3rd, Dr. Fauci, over in America, absolutely no need for masks. The science is clear. 2 months later, the science is not very clear now, and the agenda has been ramped up a few notches, and all of a sudden, Steve, we're all having to walk around muzzled. What do you think on that? Because we've got science here that changes as when and as they need. You've got Professor Neil Ferguson with his massively over-exaggerated numbers. 500,000 could be dead, And if you're someone sitting at home, this would scare you senseless, wouldn't it? And it has. It scared the population senseless. And I've sat there and I've looked at these figures and I've looked at these people and I've seen the darkness, Steve, that emanates from them. Absolutely emanates. I remember watching Matt Hancock on Good Morning Britain just when the vaccines had come out. And apparently he started crying with tears of joy. And I'm looking at the TV, Steve, and I'm sitting there looking at the TV, and Matt Hancock apparently started crying. He's so joyous, he's so happy. There was no tears. The bloke was almost laughing. It was absolutely atrocious. Steve, you've read all these books, George Orwell and, Animal Farm and all these things. These guys were on the ball, weren't they? We are being shepherded on the broad path, I believe, to destruction. The Antichrist spirit is prevalent now. And we've got politicians that are literally leading by diktat. They go to bed one night, wake up the next day. What should we do today? What new rules should we impose today? And we'll always say it's always backed up by science. Well, unfortunately, it isn't always backed up by science because you look at hundreds and hundreds of scientists around the world, PhDs after their name. But actually, Steve, are they're starting to look up, put their brave heads above the parapet, risk their livelihoods, risk their medical licenses, and say, do you know what? All may not be well. Steve, we're starting to have to be brave now, aren't we? The rubber's now starting to hit the road. But when it affects your freedoms and or your finances, this is where fear will either drive you to the Lord or drive you into the hands of men.
Absolutely. I think this has now gone on too far. I mean, everyone looked at the masks to start with and thought, okay, this will help us. But there has been so much... so many reports on that done now that show that actually a mask is of no use at all. We've also done other things, haven't we? I mean, we opened up the disco in Liverpool with so many thousand people going. We've got people going to events with, like, you can go to football with 12,000 people going. No problem. But you can't go to a wedding and have a little dance together, because that's silly. I was preaching in a church just a few weeks ago, and everyone was sitting there, as the rules say, in their mask, in their family little bubbles, keeping away from each other. A song comes up on the thing, and we have to just sit
and watch the words.
Watch the words. And I had to, when I was going to preach, I actually started by saying, it's quite ironic, isn't it? that we're doing all of this, and yet I can go down the road to a restaurant, have my mask off, have a great time with my friends, and all is well.
Yeah, all is well.
And yet here we are, unable to sing praises to God and do the things we normally do, even in a safe environment. So it's absolutely ludicrous. But I think people are now, well, you've still got two types of people. You've got the people that are going around who are still fearful, going along a road in the open air but wearing a mask, because they're so fearful. And now you've got the others who are opening up and going, hang on a minute, there's something wrong here. I want my freedoms back. This has been 15 months, especially in the height of summer. And in fact, I believe the chair or the spokesperson for the 1922 committee said the other day, if we don't open up now, then we might just about open up for August, but they'll shut us down again in September. Now, if he's saying that, what's Boris going to do? This is not going to stop. Yeah. And I think the people need to realise that this is not going to stop, and we need to realise that we have to live with this like we do with flu and other things, and get on with living. But as you say, the darkness is overcoming all of that. And I believe personally that the darkness really came into this country back in the Olympics of 2012. Because the opening and closing ceremonies were so around witchcraft. And if you remember, everyone was asked to ring a bell on the opening day. Whether it's a cycle bell, your doorbell, the church bell, everybody just ring bells. Well, if you know anything about witchcraft, you know that ringing of bells is a means of summoning up the demonic. So did we, as a nation, unknowingly perhaps, summon up a darkness that has now overtaken this country?
I really think so.
We're seeing now, it's not the government, because our parliament don't seem to be having any say in anything at the moment. It's a group of about 5 guys who are going, as you say, what should we do today? Let's do this. They've come out today and said care home staff will have the injection. Has that gone through Parliament? Has that been voted on? Is it being... No. So we're now in a bit of a totalitarian sort of system where 2 or 3 people will do, as you say, what they get up and think about in the morning. Right, we're going to do that today, and that's the way we go. But the British people, unfortunately, will just go with it because that's what we do.
Yeah. Steve, you're right. Do you know what, just going back to masks for a second, the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control in America, who are like the equivalent of Public Health England, last week basically told Americans that the lateral flow tests that they all rely so heavily on are pretty much a joke, a complete useless entity with so many false negatives, false positives. It is just a lottery. And the American public were advised just to send them back to the manufacturer or throw them in the bin. And all we're fed now, Steve, is there's a variant over here, there's a variant over there, there's a Great Yarmouth variant, Brazilian variant, there's a North Reykjavik variant, there's variants everywhere, trying to keep that fear going, Steve. And quite frankly, the more people you test, the more weird and wonderful results you're going to get. And I think we have to start realising that infection is not disease. And we've treated all these lovely little words like asymptomatic, and the biggest joke one is pre-symptomatic. If you're pre-symptomatic, it probably means you're totally healthy, so you're nothing to do with anything. And asymptomatic is, where you can pass on the infection while you're showing no symptoms, etc. And you can go on YouTube and watch the lady representative for the World Health Authority last year saying that basically asymptomatic transmission is so negligible, it's virtually non-existent, it's nothing, it just doesn't happen. Right? She obviously went back to her paymasters that night, was given a flea in her ear, threatened with something, and she was back on there the next day just to readdress her words, saying, maybe asymptomatic transmission is something that we do have to worry about. And you can just see, it's almost like a play now, Steve. It's like a theatre. And they're getting up with coming out with these ever more wondrous things that they can say. And like you say now we're starting to see a dark side, because now we're starting to be threatened with compulsory, mandatory vaccines. And I will just say, here's another government stat for you, not my own. Infection to mortality rate for this is, well, the way that it's being described, if you was an alien landed from Mars, you'd think this has got a 40-50% mortality rate, like Ebola. It's 0.3.
Yeah.
So let's get this in perspective. Yeah. It is 0.3. Anyway, Okay, so now, with this disease with a 0.3% mortality rate, which ranks at about number 24 on the World Health Organisation's most transmissible and deadly diseases, and if that's the case, why haven't we shut the world for the top 23? Quite sure about that one. Now we're starting to be threatened with no job, no jab. No job, no holiday.
Yeah.
No job, who knows where it's going to go next. No job, no shopping down at Asda's. Can't show your little vaccine card, your ID 2020 card. Maybe you can't come in and buy your bread today. Do you know what, Steve? I was under the impression that as an individual human being on this earth, we have 4 inalienable rights. Freedom of thought, which has been all but eradicated. Freedom of speech, which is running out the door quicker than Linda Christie.
Yeah.
Freedom of movement, which is now under threat with apparent COVID vaccine passports. And are you allowed to go on holiday? Amber light, green, red. Oh, we'll change it to amber while you're out in Portugal. We'll change it to red. When you come back, you've got to quarantine, even though you didn't have to. It is a joke. And the final one, which really makes me smile, we have bodily autonomy, which means that if I don't want you to administer to me medicines, injections, whatever you want, I don't have to have it.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the Nuremberg trial, Steve, the European Court of Human Rights. Those two functions themselves state very clearly that it is absolutely illegal to socially, financially coerce any individual into taking a medicine against their will, no matter what.
Yeah.
We are heading into dark times, aren't we, Steve?
Absolutely. I mean, the Nuremberg trials are the things that set that in motion. And so you're quite right. We are being coerced on just about every level. But the thing is, it's not just the coercion; it's getting people turning against people. We're having these discussions about should the people who have not had a vaccine be basically locked away so that others who have had the vaccine can get on with their lives. I mean, this has come out from past prime ministers in the last week or so. They've said that very same thing, And so coercion is a big thing. And again, one of the things that you have to ask yourself is, if this pandemic is as bad as it is, why do we need to do so much coercion to get people to do what they think they should do? We would all do what we need to do to keep people safe. No matter what I think about the situation, if I was to come to your door knowing that you were, a worried person and what I said, I would give you the respect of keeping my distance and doing the things that we need to do, because I want to keep you safe. I'm not selfish if I don't want to take the vaccine. I am looking after me, but if you take the vaccine, then you're looking after you. Selfish argument that people, as you say, people have a choice, and they should make an informed choice. And part of the problem is people just follow the crowd. But I would say to everybody, it's your choice what you do, but research it. Don't just blindly go into it. Research it so you know what you're getting into. You don't just go and buy a car for the sake of buying a car. You look for the car you want. You look to see what it's got. You make an informed choice.
Amen, Steve.
It's the same, with that.
Amen. Let me just reiterate what Steve said. We're not here telling you what to do. That is far from what we're telling you what to do. You go to the Lord, you search the scriptures, you search the information, you search everything you want to search. But this is where we and Steve are coming from. Many, many people are coming from this angle now, have been for many, many months. So it's up to you. It's between you and God. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just telling you why I am going down the road that I am, and that Steve is. This vaccine, up to you. I've took vaccines before, Steve.
Yes, so have I.
They're tried and tested.
Yes.
They're tried and tested. The average time for any medicine vaccine to go from research to being given out to the public is normally between 5 and 15 years. Sometimes as much as 20 years. So, if you want to tell me, vaccines, that's fine. I've taken a few vaccines in my time, but I knew that they had a safety record. And as usual in America and Britain, the makers are immune from any sort of comeback. They admit you are an experiment. This vaccine is under an emergency license. It's not been officially authorised. It's got emergency authorisation. It tells you it is an experiment. And we're supposed to ring in and go on with the little coloured codes to tell them about any side effects they're getting. But quite frankly, healthy with looking after myself, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, get enough sleep. Steve, there's a million and one things that are going to kill us in the end. If we're expecting that we have to have a complete eradication of one disease before we're allowed to go back down to Asda's, mask-free, this is cloud cuckoo land, isn't it?
It's never going to happen. But it's all about getting the balance, isn't it? The balance over the risk. I mean, as someone else has said, we take risks every day. You cross a busy London street, you take a risk. So we're used to taking risks. We weigh those things up and you look at the balance and go, is it worth it? And I think now that there's a great groundswell of people that are actually saying, do you know what? Yeah, I'm going to take the risk because I want freedom back. And so, there is becoming a change because people have sort of seen that over 15 months, actually, are we any further forward with it? Even with a vaccine, and if we are, then have your vaccine and get on with life.
Yeah.
Or don't have your vaccine and get on with life. But either way, it's your life, so live it.
And apparently, Steve, you have the vaccine, and on the bit of paper that tells you, it says that the government website says this might not stop you getting it, and it probably won't stop you transferring it.
Yeah.
So, in the end, you wonder why you shelled out a tenner in diesel to go down and get it. Because if it's not protecting you, and it's not stopping you giving it to someone else, well, am I losing something here, Steve?
No, you're not. You're absolutely.
I just wonder what's going on in the end.
Because, when it came out, these vaccines had this, 90% efficacy and all the rest of it, and we were being told that this was the thing that was going to get us out of lockdown. And then as soon as we start to get into the programme of having vaccines, they start backtracking on that and go, well, we don't know whether it will stop you transmitting it or getting it or whatever. Well, you can't have both.
No, you can't. This has got more movable goalposts than it's a knockout. It was back in 1988.
Yeah. So, now is the time just to say, right, the majority of people in the country, if we go by the statistics, have now had it. So we've got the amount of people that we need, if you like, to keep it under control. So let's get on with life.
The vulnerable are all double vaccinated.
Absolutely.
I forgot to think about 29-30 million people got double vaccinations. Let us make our own risk assessment, and if you want to go and cuddle your granny, go and cuddle your granny. This has affected members of my family, Steve, that are now basically just brainwashed. And my own family.
Yeah. The other thing that worries me about all of this is to get to the church in all of this, is where has the church been throughout this? Okay, yes, Coronavirus Act 2020 shut us down for a little while, and we rolled over so easily. Now, okay, the first time, I think we would have done it anyway, I think, because we wanted to get this under control. And then, of course, we were let out, I think, in September. And, our church opened up straight away. Because my thinking about that was, if we are people of faith, then we should show the world that we have faith. Now, I'm not talking about blind faith, but... you show people that we've got something and someone who we trust in, and we're willing to get back into life and to open the doors. We're here for you. But there are many churches that stayed shut and are still shut. And you say, well, why are you still shut? Well, we're a bit afraid to open. Well, what are you afraid of? My God is bigger than all of this.
Steve, you're right. Let me just invite you to text and email. And as you thought, we've got a few emails. Come in if you've got an opposite view. Come in if you've got an agreeing view, ambivalent view. Just come in any view you want. Let's get through some emails here now. Someone here's calling me Hugh. Well, Hugh's a doctor. He's got a PhD, so I know a bit of Hugh tonight. Hello, Hugh. Hugh, I heard the next scare used might be cyber attacks, as they're going to do a simulation of it, as they did for COVID in 2019 in New York. Great show. God bless.
Yes, I've heard that the next one will be possibly a cyber attack on the financial system.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Well, that would follow.
That would. Amy says, hello, you just mentioned that the British people just go along with it, but that's not necessarily true. There are over 1 million people who are not asleep to all this, don't worry, Amy, I'm one of them, who go into London every weekend to protest for our fight for our freedoms. I've been there a couple of times. Oh, and there's another bit of higgledy-piggledy maths, Steve. The last freedom rally, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was absolutely, it was hundreds of thousands. And guess what the BBC said? in their slight mentioning of it, there was an estimated 350 people that turned up.
Yeah.
Honestly, you couldn't make this stuff up. The MSM never report this, and they do lie about it. Well, they do, because you can just have a look at the photos. Hi guys, great show. You both said what I was thinking. We're all being controlled. Satan has orchestrated fear and anxiety very cleverly, blah, blah. I had the vaccine as I work in a care home. I realised I wouldn't be welcome as part of the nursing team if I hadn't had the vaccine. Well, Susan, apparently now, the first coercement that's going mandatory could be you guys. Here we go. Hi, gents. I agree totally with all you said on the subject of vaccines. We are truly in the end times. Wake up, church. Jesus coming back from Pam. God bless you, Pam. Hip, hip, hooray at last. I'm so glad to finally hear you speak out the truth about what's going on. Not a moment too soon. I agree 1,000% with what you said. Thank you, Marcus Steve. Blessings. Thank you, Caroline. I'm just going through them one by one. Hi, Marcus Steve. Psalm 90, verse 4. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day. Hosea 6:2. After 2 days, he'll revive us, and on the third day, we will live in his presence. 2,000 years from Jesus' death and resurrection will be over in just 8 years' time, with the 7-year trip beginning in October 22. Thank you, Robert. God bless you. Cynthia, a few days ago, Marcus Lamb from Daystar TV, Christian TV, told people not to have the vaccine. We're not doing that. We're saying you do what you want to do between you and God, okay? It is totally up to you, okay? It is totally up to you. Thank you. That's from Cynthia. Thank you, Cynthia. They told us not to wear masks. They wanted them for the NHS. If they'd given us masks to start with, there wouldn't have been so many COVID cases. Also, they sent elderly people back to care homes where they died of COVID because they wanted the hospital beds for the real COVID onslaught, which was happening under their noses in care homes. If you ask me, thank you, Maggie, the government was protecting the NHS from us. Thanks, Maggie. There's an opposite opinion there. God bless you, Mag. Brian says, Babylon means confusion, which is what is being used on the world as COVID 2019 in Daniel's abomination of 90 days, stand in the holy place, pointed out by Jesus for the last days. Matthew 24:15, who is 1335 of days as God's seed and his law. Well, this is, Brian, it's above my head, and it's I won't be able to get through that in a few moments. Frankie, Belfast, every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and is now already in the world. Keep shining bright. Brothers, please take great care in accusing the government of orchestrating the COVID situation. You appear to have lost sight of we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and the government is comprised of men and women. But we do stand against the principalities and powers. Ephesians 6:12 there. We do not fight against the government of this country, but we should be praying urgently for them. Believe me, absolutely. We are. For the MPs and the civil service who have been put in place by God for our benefit. Were it not for Boris Johnson's God-given foresight, we would have not had any vaccine ready, and there would have been an overloaded NHS and many more deaths of people who would have been robbed of the opportunity to hear the gospel of Jesus is untimely death. We are being duped indeed by the media, who are in Satan's control. The media, not the government. I think the government's bought the media. They spent about 300 million quid on an advertising campaign. I wear a mask for other people so they're not scared of me or infection. If you love them, you would do likewise. Okay? Like the opposite views, and masks do work. They minimise the transfer of any virus, vivid SARS, flu, cold, or other coronavirus. Not good, brothers, not good, and not God. Your brother in Christ, John. Thank you, John. Thank you for every word, and I sincerely mean that. Hi, guys. 1,600 deaths from COVID. That's less than flu. When the WHO get the flu vaccine wrong, 28,000 over 2 to 3 months, 1 in 214. Norma, not quite sure where that one is, Norma, but thank you so much. Right from the very beginning, the government never ever told us the truth, even about the first lockdown. They should have acted quicker, and they knew about it. Liz, thank you, Liz. Something I want to know and need a medical person to explain, not me. Why do they put so many people into induced comas? My understanding after nursing a son after a coma is that bodies become weakened when in a coma, particularly muscles and respiratory muscles. This is above me. Was it because the patients' bodies could not cope, or was it the NHS could not cope? Not sure, Jill. God bless you. Thank you so much. Remember the Nightingale Hospital, Steve? Yeah, all over the country. Just great big pictures of ready for the onslaught.
Never really.
I think 2 cleaners and a church mouse turned up with that one.
Yeah.
And guys, you're so right when you talk about propaganda. The government plan is hidden in plain sight, and it is plain sight. Government websites say subcommittee Spire B, there's your Spire B, behavioural insights team, which uses applied psychology in both so they can change the thinking of the population without them realising it. Thank you, Dory. Great show, guys. Really good content. I'm glad that I'm not the only Christian who thinks this. Nikki from Ipswich. Steve, Nikki's right. You can get the idea from the propaganda that there's only about 46 of us in this country that think this.
Yeah.
There's a few more.
There is, yeah.
There absolutely is.
I was trying to get to the point of that we generally as a nation are apathetic, as opposed to, that's really where I was coming from on that. But, because we just go along with the flow. But people are waking up now, and that's good. But my question is, and I know time is going, is where is this heading next? Because there is going to come a time when the story runs out, if you like, and they can't keep doing that. I mean, they'll keep bringing in variants, I'm sure. But how can they keep the lockdowns going and that? And that'll be, with what's going on with G7 and that now, is global warming. That's where this is going to head to. It will be the global warming. That'll be the next crisis. In fact, if you listen to many of the people, that the world is on a knife edge. But if I could give you some quick facts. Our world, because God created a brilliant world, runs in cycles.
Yeah, it does.
And so we have warmer cycles, we have colder cycles. And actually, the truth seems to be, from a lot of science, is that we're now heading into a colder cycle. How long that'll be. But it's interesting that there's been no end of studies on temperature rise. And I'll just give you one because time is short. And that is this. There's been a 70-year study in Sweden about temperature rise in Sweden. And they've done all sorts of things. They've used satellite data. They've used everything they've done. And the net change in temperature in Sweden over 70 years... zero. Yeah, absolute zero. They said that we would by now probably be 2 meters underwater because waters are rising. We're not. Again, but they'll use all of this. Now, yes, we need to look after our planet, obviously, but this again is scaremongering into keeping us under control, and that's where this will go.
25 years ago, about Professor David Bellamy, the professor of botany, basically said that the idea of man-made global warming was poppycock. And I'm sure he had a good scientific reason why he could tell you. But we're treated to the likes of Greta Thunberg turning up at every government agency, bunking off school and telling us off of an auto cue why we should all be getting rid of our cars. Yeah. It is actually quite sad. I'm going to leave you guys with a quote from Dr. Mike Yeadon. This is his point of view. I've got an O-level in biology. This is probably the most highly qualified immunologist and bacteriologist in the world. Former chief of Pfizer Global Head, and one of the world's most experienced immunologists. And he says this. This is his point of view. Still not persuaded? Ask yourself why all governments at once made the same mistakes in terms of policy responses, all of which inclined to maximise the number of deaths attributed to COVID-19. Why they persisted with lockdowns long after it had been proven they do not work. Why masks were widely mandated even though they knew they don't work. Why they deployed a PCR mass testing system which still hasn't been characterised in relation to false positives. Why governments were comfortable with the withdrawal of medical services, which has directly and predictably led to tens of thousands of avoidable deaths. Why they've lied about asymptomatic transmission, thus causing fear of everyone. Why they've spent money on maintaining fear and placing a tight clamp on media, extending to social media and even scientific journals, suppressing alternative medicines. Hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, both got great track records, safe as houses apparently, and heal you from it and stop you getting it again. But you're not allowed to have those. Why they've expedited new technology vaccines and studiously ignored growing evidence of harms and indeed fatal responses. Why they've all but closed international borders based on immunological lies. Why they've hugely extended the duration of the confected crisis, even though we know that poverty alone leads to increased mortality. Why they're so careless about budgets, and why they've bribed the population with their own money to go along with this, because we will pay for this, Steve. We will pay for it. Why they've gone to extraordinary lengths to smear, damage experts capable of telling what they believe is the truth and counter official lies. I put it to you that the kind of person who can give orders which predictably led to avoidable deaths numbered in thousands has something in common. That attribute is that having got used to condemning thousands to die, will have no difficulty whatsoever in doing sand with death tolls numbering in their millions. As Stalin said, a single death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. He says more. I do believe he's a Christian because he ends that text in prayerful words. Steve, we're down to the last 20 seconds. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've loved your presence, Steve. Thank you so much. Hope to have you back one day again. Hopefully with not such a contentious subject.
Yeah.
It's what the whole world's talking about.
Absolutely.
You do what is right between you and the Lord. Just whatever you feel take from us, take. If not, leave it. By God's grace and his goodness, I'll see you again next Wednesday. God bless you.
Good evening, Mr. Sir. From London, England. In order to